In the previous lecture, I shared with you an important viewpoint. Living in the present is the key to overcoming intuitive thinking and moving towards rational thinking. In this lecture, we will discuss the rational problems that individuals face when cooperating with others, namely, how do we make decisions that are good for everyone in a cooperative situation? The risk of cooperation in the prisoner's dilemma is one of the greatest achievements in human evolutionary history. In modern society, it is hard to imagine a scenario where something can be accomplished by one person without the help of others. The streets we walk on, the buildings we live in, and every job we have are all the result of cooperation between humans. However, we are not always cooperating because cooperation itself comes at a cost and can even bring risks. This risk is the core concept in game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is a game model created by two researchers from the Rand Corporation in 1950 to simulate cooperation and competition between the United States and the former Soviet Union. This model can be understood through the following scenario. Two accomplices in a crime are caught by the police and locked up in separate cells without communication. The police give these two suspects three choices. The first choice is that if both of them do not confess to the crime, according to the evidence they have, they will each be sentenced to 2 years in prison. In other words, if the two accomplices choose to cooperate with each other, they will each spend 2 years in jail. The second choice is that if both of them confess to the crime, according to the evidence they have and the new evidence they provide, they will each be sentenced to 4 years in prison. In other words, if the two accomplices choose to betray each other, they will each spend 4 years in jail. If the story ended here, the choice for the two accomplices would be very simple. They should cooperate with each other and conceal the crime together instead of betraying each other because betraying each other would result in a longer prison sentence. However, what traps these two accomplices is the third choice. What is the third choice? It is when one criminal chooses not to confess to the crime, while the other criminal chooses to betray their accomplice and confess to the crime. The criminal who confesses to the crime will be released on the spot because they cooperated with the police and provided evidence of the crime that the police did not know about. The other criminal, who not only resisted police interrogation but also now has new evidence of the crime due to their accomplice's confession, will be sentenced to 6 years in prison. It may sound a bit confusing, so let me repeat the three choices. Both do not confess to the crime and are sentenced to 2 years each. Both confess to the crime and are sentenced to 4 years each. One confesses to the crime and is released, while the other remains silent and is sentenced to 6 years. From the perspective of the collective interest, the two accomplices should choose to conceal the crime together because each person will only spend 2 years in prison. This is the rational choice and the best outcome. However, from an individual's perspective, you would certainly want to confess to the crime yourself and have your accomplice remain silent so that you can be released without punishment. This is a rational choice from an individual's point of view. But if you think this way, your accomplice is not stupid either, and they will also think the same way. Therefore, the final outcome will be that both of you confess to the crime, resulting in both of you being sentenced to 4 years in prison. Therefore, if every individual in a group makes a rational decision based on their own interests, these decisions, combined, will harm everyone in the group and ultimately lead to no one benefiting. So how can we break the prisoner's dilemma and encourage cooperation so that rational decisions can be made at the collective level? Sincerity is the key to breaking the prisoner's dilemma. In fact, there is a very simple strategy to break this dilemma, which was invented by Professor Robert Axelrod, a mathematical psychologist at the University of Michigan, called tit for tat. Specifically, this strategy consists of 2 steps. In the beginning, you choose to cooperate. In other words, you always choose to cooperate in the first round. In subsequent interactions, you adopt a fixed strategy, which is to treat the other person the same way they treated you last time. For example, if the other person betrayed you last time, then you also betray them this time. If the other person cooperated with you, then you also choose to cooperate this time. It's that simple. This is the so-called tit-for-tat strategy. If you interact with the other person using this strategy a few times, they will start to choose to cooperate on their own, which is how the prisoner's dilemma is broken. This seemingly simple strategy contains very important psychological principles for human interaction. The first principle is kindness. At the beginning, you choose to cooperate instead of betraying the other person. In other words, you have a cooperative heart when interacting with others. This way, you give others a kind start. The second principle is retaliation. In cooperation, you cannot be a person without principles. When the other person betrays you, you must retaliate without hesitation. The premise of successful cooperation is to let the other person see your firm and uncompromising attitude and effective and swift retaliation. The third principle is forgiveness. No matter how many times the other person has betrayed you, as long as they choose to cooperate this time, you should also choose to cooperate next time and forgive their past betrayal. Why? Because your goal is to cooperate, so you need to use your kindness to encourage the other person's kindness. The fourth principle is transparency. This principle is also the most important principle in my opinion. As you can see, the strategies listed above are very simple. In summary, you come with kindness and cooperation, and the other person's choice now determines your choice next time. This is a transparent strategy with no complex logic or motives. This is actually the highest emotional intelligence, sincerity. You don't need to figure out what the other person is thinking or what their motives are. You just need to show your true self to others. In this sincerity, there is your kindness, your forgiveness, and your retaliation. We often say that there are only permanent interests, not permanent love or hate. If we always stay in the hatred of the past, then once the situation changes and a new opportunity for cooperation arises, you who are immersed in hatred will miss this opportunity.